Participants Noah argues the no guns fewer mass shootings case based on strict regime countries. Liam argues caution, rarity, causality, substitution, implementation. Noah, let's anchor in outcomes. Countries with very restrictive civilian gun access tend to have dramatically lower firearm death rates, and in at least one prominent case, Australia after 1996, there were no mass shootings for decades following reform. That's not a quirky data point, it aligns with cross-national studies showing fewer guns correlate with fewer firearm homicides. If the question is whether aggressive availability constraints can reduce mass shootings, the international record says yes, especially over time. Liam, I won't dispute the pattern, but patterns aren't proofs. Mass shootings are rare, which means you can go years without one by chance. A policy introduced after the last incident can look miraculous even if causality is weak. Also, reforms rarely happen in isolation. Policing changes, economic cycles, mental health services, and border enforcement all move at once. It's hard to cleanly credit no guns for every downstream effect. Noah, fair, but when multiple independent indicators move in the expected direction, declines in firearm deaths, disappearance of mass shootings, reduced access to rapid-fire weapons, it strengthens the argument. And the mechanisms are straightforward: fewer high-capacity weapons in civilian circulation, tighter licensing, mandatory storage, and fewer leakage points for illicit supply. You reduce the ease of carrying out a high-casualty attack. Liam, mechanisms cut both ways. Restricting legal supply doesn't eliminate illicit markets. If enforcement fades or cross-border trafficking rises, the effect can erode. And there's substitution: a determined attacker might adopt other weapons or methods. We've seen cases where overall violence falls less than firearm violence, implying some displacement. Noah, substitution exists, but lethality matters. Firearms, especially semi-automatic rifles and high-capacity magazines, are unusually efficient at producing mass casualties quickly. If policy shifts attackers toward less lethal methods, that's a public health win even if the number of violent incidents doesn't fall one for one. The aim is fewer deaths and injuries, not just fewer incidents. Liam, then be precise about the claim: strict regimes reduce firearm mass casualty lethality, not no guns, no mass shootings. The latter sounds like an iron law. Reality is conditional: sustained enforcement, tight borders, and cultural compliance are required. Without them, bans on paper won't deliver in practice. Noah, I can live with that precision. Still, when we look at countries where enforcement and culture align, Japan is the extreme: firearm homicides are vanishingly rare. That demonstrates the ceiling of what's possible with strict access. Not every country can replicate Japan's legal and cultural environment, but the direction of travel is informative. Liam, and yet, even in strict contexts, you need constant vigilance. Policy fatigue and resource constraints can undermine inspections and storage audits. Technology changes too: 3D printing and parts kits complicate control. If no guns is shorthand for we passed a law once, it will disappoint. It has to mean a long-run governance commitment. Noah, agreed. Think program, not proclamation. Buybacks paired with criminal penalties for trafficking, licensing that includes training, safe storage checks, and renewal, tight rules on high-capacity weapons, and real consequences for dealers who break compliance. Also, data systems, track thefts, trace recovered firearms, and target hotspots. Liam, add cross-border cooperation, because leakage routes undermine domestic regimes. And invest in non-firearm prevention, threat assessment teams, faster mental health access, and secure architecture in sensitive venues. If we frame the problem as guns only, we underinvest in the broader safety net. Noah, that's not intention. It's a portfolio: reduce access to the most lethal instruments and raise the probability of early intervention. The international cases you're wary of are compelling precisely because they did both, law plus administration. Liam, I'm wary not because the outcomes are good, but because the inference gets oversold. For example, one highly publicized before-after series can drive a narrative even when the underlying event count is too small for robust statistics. Policymakers need humility, acknowledge uncertainty, measure continuously, and be ready to adjust if displacement or illicit markets offset the gains. Noah, totally. Build dashboards: mass casualty incidents per year, fatalities per incident, illicit market indicators, thefts, time to crime on traced firearms, storage compliance rates. Publish them. If substitution rises, add countermeasures. If trafficking spikes, shift resources to border interdiction. Liam, and incorporate equity. Strict regimes that are enforced unevenly can criminalize some communities more than others. Strong safeguards, clear probable cause standards, civilian oversight, and due process protections must be written into the model. Noah, yes, evidence-based, rights-respecting enforcement. The end state is fewer mass casualty attacks and lower firearm mortality with minimal rights intrusions and equitable application. International experience suggests it's achievable, though not effortless. Liam, then here's my conditional endorsement: a strict regime can reduce firearm mass casualty lethality if it's embedded in a durable system: border controls, enforcement capacity, data transparency, due process, and non-firearm prevention. Drop any of those, and the promise weakens. Noah, and here's mine: without materially reducing civilian access to the most lethal weapons, you leave a lot of preventable tragedy on the table. The best international cases show the upside of going all in and staying the course. Liam, we converge on the need for rigor and honesty. Don't sell certainty where the data are thin, don't ignore gains where they're robust. If policy is framed as adaptive: measure, publish, iterate, you'll keep public trust. Noah, and you'll save lives. That's the point. The slogan may be blunt, but the implementation can be nuanced and effective. Liam, then let's argue less about slogans and more about the details that make outcomes real. Build the system, watch the numbers, protect rights, and recalibrate as needed. Noah, deal. Evidence first, durable systems always.